And look who's coming up.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily here on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. My name is Dean Millard. Welcome to the Marsh. It was a wild weekend, as it usually is in the world of sports, and we're going to try and cover it off all here on Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily. The last couple of shows, we did not have the usual technology, so I really appreciate everybody sticking around and enjoying the show, and in all its capacity, as we will get to what we have going on the program today in just a second. Andy McNamara is the head of football operations for Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. He is going to join us in just a few minutes. Andy will be logging on, and he will be chatting with us about, he's got some really cool lists, rankings that you need to know about, and an awesome new show starting on Sundays. Larry Fisher is the head of operations when it comes to hockey on the UFFS platform. He is the go-to, the guru when it comes to everybody at UFF Sports. So it is going to be awesome to chat with Larry about some of the cool things that we have going with the scouting platform, which is literally one of a kind. You will not find anything like this anywhere out there. And it's on the blockchain, which is also very cool in its own regard. And we'll take a look at some top shelf fantasy nights and weeks as far as top performances. Okay, really quickly before we bring in our guest, Andy McNamara, got to get to our question of the day. Question of the day is, did Rory McIlroy win the Tour Championship, or did Scotty Scheffler lose it? I mean, that was an epic collapse yesterday. It was wild. We'll have a little bit more on this later, but I got to say, Rory obviously played pretty well, but Scotty Scheffler lost this. He had a 6-shot lead. And it's not like he fell apart. Well, he fell apart a little bit early, but they were still even going on. So love to hear from everybody on Twitch today. Tony says, welcome back, Dean. Thank you very much, boss. Chime in on the message board on Twitch. Did Rory win, or did Scotty Scheffler lose? And our top three today, based on the fact that Aroldis Chapman is now on the injured list because of a tattoo infection in his leg, what are the top three strangest injuries in sports? I'm going with Jason Pierre-Paul, who blew off part of his fingers in a fireworks July 4th accident. Actually came back to play with the club, so good on him. Glenn Allen Hill. Remember this guy, Blue Jays fans? He had a nightmare. He was afraid of spiders. He had a nightmare about spiders, fell through a glass table. And Dustin Penner. Pancake Penner, who hurt himself somehow leaning over to eat delicious pancakes that his wife had made. So top three injuries, chime in on that as well if you will. But right now, we got to bring him in. He is the head of football operations for UFFS, and he is ready to bring you all that you need to win your fantasy league. Andy McNamara joining me. How are you, buddy?
Good, Dean. How are you, brother?
I am awesome. I think I'm most excited because preseason football is over, and I hate preseason football. Like I'm not a big fan of most preseason sports, and you've been in the media a long time. I've been in the media. We're forced to watch a lot of garbage games, and now people might be saying you're complaining about watching sports. There are some garbage games that sports people have to watch, and it's part of the job. But preseason football is up there because, like, Tom Brady played one series. I mean, it's important, I know, but it's really hard to get into and watch unless you are definitely doing it from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, the overreaction. Every year you see a backup, a rookie, a third string guy blow something. I was like, this guy's going to be a Pro Bowler. And then you realize most of the guys will be working at a UPS who he was playing against in a week's time. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's all over the place. However, there's that combined part of it where it's, okay, you're not going against starters, but maybe you can start getting a feel. And it's kind of exciting if you have new players to a team or a rookie. How do they look in that uniform? Dean, I think it's more if a player looks bad in preseason, that's the bigger concern than if a player looks good in preseason.
Yeah, I think that's probably more of the case as well, is that's what you're looking for. And it's just, it's hard to just get really excited when you're like, okay, how do I know that this guy is going to be the next coming or the worst thing? Do I take this guy late? I think, in all honesty, I think preseason football confuses a lot of people because you're like, okay, this guy looked good, but in such short supply, or short three series or 3 games or whatever.
Right, and then you can have the overreaction as well, as if a starter didn't look good, right? As far as like he only played 3 and he was trying, because these preseason games, coaches are also trying to work through different things. Okay, we're trying to see how this looks in a real live action situation that we've been practicing. So it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. Defenses, you're seeing plain vanilla every year. You're not seeing anything creative. So it's, it can be exciting. Malik Willis, people going crazy over him. It's like, okay, that's fine. He ran a lot. He's a smaller Lamar Jackson. That's cool. Let's see how he can throw a football when the games actually matter. And you see guys like, what was it, George Pickens, like they're having Good Morning Football was a great little bit today where he jams the cornerback right up, but he pushed them so hard like they fall over, and he's been doing it since college. It was just such power. So it's like, okay, well, that's something I'm interested in, because depending where I was at with George Pickens as a rookie, it's like, all right, well, this dude's aggressive. He's hitting within that 5-yard limit. Maybe I'm going to be a little more interested to see how this guy develops and plays out. And so you pick up those little nuggets. But all in all, you just hope your fantasy players get through the preseason, not injured. And the main thing, I say this every single year, is do not have your fantasy football draft until after the preseason games. And people listen sometimes they don't. But if you don't listen and the guy tears an ACL, that's on you.
Yeah, we have our fantasy, the league that I'm the defending champion in. Ooh. And I will say, thanks to some of your suggestions last year at the draft, we have our draft tonight. Jamie Thomas is the commissioner, and like a true commissioner, waits till the preseason is over, because you're right. There is nothing more devastating than watching your star or somebody key go down in a shared practice or something, or get hit by a helmet, like by Aaron Donald or something. Yep. You know what? The fantasy football is so much about knowing what is going on, and that comes down to knowing what's going on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays especially. You're going to help people out with that on Sundays. You got a really cool show that's going to be right here on our Twitch channel Sunday mornings. Tell us about Ultimate Fantasy Football.
Oh, man, I'm so pumped. And this is the prime time. The key to a good fantasy show, Dean, and the great thing about being on Twitch is we can sort of be more flexible than some of the big network time frames are. The key is timing. So our show, Ultimate Fantasy Football, is going to be 11 a.m. Eastern to 12 noon every Sunday during the NFL season. And why is that important? It's because at 11:30, that's when NFL teams have to release who's injured, who's playing, who's the starting lineup. So for your fantasy team, that's crucial, obviously, because if you're on the fence with somebody, okay, so-and-so pulled a hammy in practice this week, where do I look? This gives you that specific point to ask those questions right then. If somebody's out all of a sudden, you're like, well, who should I start off my bench? Who can I pick? Whatever. You get access right here on Twitch. So we'll get you all the up to the second, your last minute fantasy football details. Use those hashtags, Ask Andy, and get those questions in. And we're going to have a lot of fun all season. So it's going to be sort of that fun, frantic, okay, we're live in the moment. What's going to happen with all this fantasy news coming in fast and furious?
You can find the Twitter handle right there, AndyMC81, and you're the head of football with UFFS. That means the UFAFL, and also something unbelievable, the UCFFL. College football, NFL football, fantasy of the highest degree and highest stakes. We also have the Legends League. But how excited are you about, this time last year, we're getting ready for our NFL league, UFAFL. Now we're adding our college league, which is unheard of. And it all comes back to that scouting platform. We're going to talk to Larry Fisher a little bit later about it. But it really brings the whole thing together with this college league, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. And it blends in. The college side really blends that scouting side with it at the highest level. And it completes the football ecosystem for UFF Sports, because every player, as we know, is one of one. One league, one franchise, and every player is its own singular being. So now what happens with this ecosystem on the college side is, all right, you have them on your college team. Are you the scout who owns them? Are you an owner of a team who's also the scout who owns that player? They play through, then they go pro. Okay, well, now you're auctioning that player off to the UFAFL team. And so now you're following this player from college. He turns pro. And then when he retires, he plays in football heaven forever in the American Football Legends League, our esports league. So it's such a cool concept, because you go from a player's start to pro to forever in Legends. So I just love how this ties it all together. And Dean, I got to say too, I'm so pumped because we have our first college football ambassador, Zion Bones. I know you mentioned it on the show last week, of University of Hawaii. We're going to have a 5 NFT membership set where if you collect all 5, you will get special rewards and access to that player, autographs, video calls. If you're lucky enough to be in Hawaii, meet and greets. Zion's such a cool dude. And also his custom merchandise shop with the War Dogs team, who's his UCFFL franchise. He has his own customized shop up there. That's all over our Twitter at the UCFFL and on Instagram at the UFAFL. So that's all over the place too. So we got the college guys excited. And then, like I said, that completes the ecosystem all the way through to the Legends.
Yeah, it's so cool. So we have that coming out. We also have our daily fantasy play that's going to happen this year. We've got some stuff on the racing, but just that daily fantasy element to our fantasy football platform is really going to take us to another level. Yeah,
and what I really like too with all the football leagues, and if we talk fantasy, daily fantasy, season long, whatever it might be from the college and the NFL side, is the defensive aspect, the full-bodied aspect of these leagues. This isn't your typical, okay, I need to pick 3 wide receivers, a flex spot. No. You got to know who that backup linebacker is. You got in college, who's that freshman? Because it's all dynasty, right? Who's that freshman who might get some playing time now, but you think is going to be a stud coming forward, right? Who's going to take over? Which teams have lost a lot of seniors on both sides of the football? UFAFL side, of course, a 53-man roster, right? It's not just the rosters, it's the salary cap. How are you balancing that? How are you getting to the floor? How are you staying under the cap and mixing those? So what I love to see is really the true football minds, because anybody can pick the stars. I can tell you Tom Brady's a great quarterback. That's not a mystery. Can I tell you who the backup will linebacker is on the Cleveland Browns, who's going to make a splash in tackles and come in if somebody gets hurt? That's where the brilliance of UFAFL and the college side comes in, where you have that whole 53-man on NFL and then the big defensive side on college too.
Yeah, and then we bring in the daily fantasy element, and it's just all going to bring it together. But this is what we want to talk about right now. People like me have our drafts tonight. A lot of them are dynasty leagues, but there's a lot of people in starting off their leagues, and these rankings are important, or if these guys are free agents in your league. So let's get it. Everybody, in UFAFL, quarterbacks are huge. In the NFL, quarterbacks are huge. In general normal fantasy, as I call it, they're not the biggest, but they obviously are still important, especially when you have guys that also pick up points on the ground. I guess the weighing factor is those guys possibly could get injured more, but you have Josh Allen as number 1, and that's a guy that also uses his feet as much as his arm.
Right, and also with the Gridiron Seals in UFAFL. And here's the thing, Dean. Coming into this year, I was trying to convince myself, how can it not be Josh Allen? I was trying to go through different scenarios. How, barring injury, how would Josh Allen not be the best fantasy quarterback in the UFAFL, or the NFL or normal fantasy. I couldn't do it. I went through a whole bunch of different scenarios. I could not convince myself that it would not be Josh Allen. You said it. He's got the leg, but he's also got a cannon arm. And what's very rare with Josh Allen, his journey and development from being small school, super raw. Usually when you come out of college, you look at a quarterback's completion percentage. And if they're in a relatively, somewhat normal pass-heavy offense, whatever it might be, that completion percentage usually does not jump dramatically to the NFL level. Josh Allen's under 60%. You're like, the guy can sling it. Credit to him and Brian Daboll, who's now with the Giants, of course, as head coach. He has increased it each year. He's got the legs. He's got the big body. He's got the targets with Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, McKenzie's coming up. You got Dawson Knox. Josh Allen just makes too much sense to not be the top guy.
Okay, so I really agree with a lot of that. Is it a fairly close race? Like, is 1, 2, 3, and then there's the separator? Is Mahomes still, still that top tier guy? And then you have Tom Brady, who's 45, and said, "Hey, I got bleep to do. I got stuff to do. I said bleep because
What are we? Werewolves, not swearwolves.
We're werewolves, not swearwolves, okay? We don't swear on this show, so we're werewolves, not swearwolves. And Tom Brady had bleep to do, but you got a 45-year-old still in the top 5 of your fantasy with a bunch of other young guys that love running around the field. How close is Tom Brady to some of these other guys? And is it a top 3? Is it a top 4? Is it a top 5? And then there's separation.
When we look at Tom Brady, Dean, it's the man threw for over 5,000 yards last year. Over 5,000 yards. Who am I to discount Tom Brady? Many have done it for a decade. Foolish. No. Now, someday we think Tom Brady will not be good. Maybe. Or maybe he'll just leave after this year and still be a stud. The trouble when you look at guys like, let's say, at Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, Matthew Stafford, is if they're not throwing 300-plus yards, 3 touchdowns, no interception games, you're not going to get any of the value with the legs. So could Tom Brady conk out this year? Absolutely. I'm just not going to bet against him. I've learned. I'm not going to, which means he'll probably do nothing this year, of course, right? But when we look at the separation, I think Justin Herbert is probably a year, maybe a year or 2 away from being right there with Josh Allen, man. He's kind of like a Josh Allen light right now. Same sort of big-bodied, big arm, can move when he has to, and he's got a lot of weapons around. I could argue maybe he has more weapons than Josh Allen. So I think Justin Herbert is right there. He's right at that tier. Joe Burrow, not as mobile as the others, but not statuesque still. And you got to keep an eye on that knee as well. But it's a pass-heavy offense. They throw, and then throw some more. And when you have Jamar Chase, you got T. Higgins, you got Tyler Boyd, you got Mixon in the backfield. You can mix in a tight end. He's going to be throwing the football. So that's why you keep those top 3. Mahomes is the real wild card. Tyreek Hill's gone. Okay? Mm-hmm. So are we funneling the ball to Travis Kelce all day? How are we spreading it around? Juju Smith-Schuster was a nice number 2 in Pittsburgh. When he had a chance to be a number 1, he caved, he buckled. So what are these other guys going to be doing? That's the real question. Pat Mahomes is a hell of a talent, and he's too good not to be fantasy relevant. But that's why I put him in that 4 spot. I thought, you know what? We got to see how this plays out.
Okay, so I'm looking at your receiver list here, and I know the quarterback in Tampa is in the top 5, but the number 1 receiver in Tampa is not in your top 5. Mr. Touchdown, Mike Evans. I'm not as smart as you, but I might bump him ahead of CeeDee Lamb just because of who his quarterback is.
You know what? I love Mike Evans, and I think the guy's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's just been an absolute stud. Has been banged up the last few years. And what we have seen, though, is he's had some weird stat lines. Remember, what was it? Last year before, it was like 3 catches, 2 touchdowns?
Yeah.
Okay. That's bizarre. Is he still the guy, though, that can get you over 1,000? And with 17 games, really 1,100 yards. That's sort of going to be the new standard for 1,000-yard season with that extra game. Now 1,100 is sort of going to be that patch. Whenever you have to be touchdown dependent, that's where I get a little hesitant. Like a Robert Tonyan from a couple years ago with Green Bay. Now he got hurt, but his touchdown to catch ratio was ridiculous. So for Mike Evans, listen, if you end up with Mike Evans on your fantasy team, you're not going to be too upset about it, right? Rage has him. They're going to be quite happy in the UFAFL with Mike Evans. I just don't believe that when you look at a game-by-game right now, that I would trust him ahead of some of the other names on that list.
Okay, running backs always so important, and I know we got to get you out in a second, but what surprised you the most about putting together your top 12 running back list?
Well, when I was looking at probably the toughest part was Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
And the reason is when the man's on the field, and here's the difference between him and a Saquon Barkley, because I get asked that a lot. Well, Saquon's injured and you don't have him on. The difference is when Christian McCaffrey has been injured, the second he comes back, he's an RB1 stud.
Yeah.
His feet touch the field, the guy balls out. Whereas Saquon, he's, I think he's almost glue factory ready, unfortunately. Heck of a talent, but the injuries. So the question was, okay, with Christian McCaffrey, where do we put him? I'm not ready to call him injury prone, but the last 2 years he has been injured. That has to be taken into account. That's why I have a Jonathan Taylor ahead of him, because he has not had that issue yet. Will that happen this year? Maybe, but it hasn't yet. And the offensive line is great. And so with Christian McCaffrey, I think there is certainly a path where he could be the top running back. I wasn't just ready to put him there quite yet.
Okay, tight ends are so interesting because there's, to me, so few when any of the offensive positions. So lots of ways to go in fantasy. Do you go out and get the best tight end because there's so few of them, or do you wait and just hope your tight end gets lucky during the season and gets some targets or something? What's your thought process on tight ends?
Well, I'll tell you, in the UFAFL, Dean, the Warriors, their process was to get the best tight end because they made a big trade to get Travis Kelce in this offseason. So their idea was get the best guy. And I think he's still going to be the best guy, even though at 33, I believe we've seen the tip and probably starting to go on the downside a little bit with Travis Kelce. Now, I think the volume's going to be there. How that translates again without Tyreek Hill and him being the main focus, at least to start the year, it's going to be very interesting. Remains to be seen. But because they're so rare, you have to go one of two ways, depending where you pick. So if you're in, let's take your traditional 12-team league. If you're picking like 11-12, and you're probably going to have a run on running backs, probably have a run on wide receivers, I would look to take, let's say, a Travis Kelce at that point because he's going to be the best available at that position rather than getting the sixth best running back, for example. And there is that separation. So when we look at that list right there, Travis Kelce, number one, Mark Andrews, again, based on volume, that's still a very heavy run-first offense in Baltimore. But we know when Lamar Jackson throws the football, it goes to Mark Andrews. And then Dalton Schultz. I'm more bullish on Dalton Schultz than most. I just love the clarity. Dean, in fantasy, you want clarity. You want a clear depth chart. Who is getting the football? Well, in Dallas, it's CeeDee Lamb, it's Dalton Schultz, it's Ezekiel Elliott, and we know Dak Prescott can be a heck of a quarterback. So that's why I have Dalton Schultz up there, especially with Michael Gallup's injury to begin the year. There's going to be a lot of targets that need to go around. So I'm very bullish on Dalton Schultz and really the whole Cowboys this year.
And, the one thing I look at with that list is Waller has another option in Vegas that it's not always going to be Darren Waller. And George Kittle has a different quarterback. So those two factors could really impact Waller and Kittle and their production this year.
Well, and Kittle, we just talked about injuries, right?
Yeah.
Kittle cannot stay on the field. And that's been a weird thing with San Francisco the last 3 years. Both sides of the ball littered with injuries. I don't know why. Bad training? I don't know. Bad trades? Whatever. Unlucky? Whatever. When George Kittle's on the field, you can put him as a 1B to Travis Kelce, no doubt. Can't stay on the field. Also, think what you want about Jimmy G. At least you knew what you were getting with Jimmy G. I knew I was getting a dink and dunk guy with Jimmy G. I knew it was going to Debo. I knew it was going to George Kittle and sometimes to Brandon Ayuk. Well, now with Trey Lance, I don't know. I know he can run. I know he played one college game, Dean. One college game in the year before he got drafted because of the COVID year. And then like a few games the year before. Incredibly raw. More raw than Josh Allen. More raw than Pat Mahomes. There's a lot of questions. Now, he might be able to translate that into a Jalen Hurts type of rookie year where he uses his legs and his arm can be good enough. But, Dean, we just don't know. So I'm downgrading all 49ers fantasy options from Deebo Samuel to George Kittle and all that just because, again, we don't know what Trey Lance is going to be. Is he just going to run? Are there going to be turnovers? What the case is, we're going to have to wait and find out.
Beautiful stuff, my man. Can't wait for the show on Sundays, 11 a.m. Eastern, twitch.tv/Ultimate Fantasy Sports with Andy McNamara. Hit him up. Send your questions to @AndyMC81. Thank you so much, my man. Great chatting with you. And enjoy the NFL, the college, the UFAFL, the UCFFL, and any other FFLs and UFLs we can fit in there.
Well, absolutely, brother. Listen, check out, you want to see these great logos, merch shops, and check everything out, you go uffsports.com/UFAFL or uffsports.com/UCFFL. Check it out. You won't regret it.
Excellent. Thanks, my man. Take care.
Thanks, buddy. See ya.
You bet. There's Andy McNamara, the head of football. That's going to be an awesome show on Sundays to get you ready for the football season. Always awesome listening to you guys. Thanks so much, Liz. I believe that's Liz chiming in on our Twitch message board. You can do the same, obviously. If you're watching this live, you're watching it on Twitch, chime in, say hello. If you're watching it, or if you missed anything and you want to check it out later on, you can always find it on our YouTube channel, which is Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. And we put out all of our shows in podcast format as well. So just search wherever you find your favorite podcasts at Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to get into our top 3, which is strangest injuries because of the Aroldis Chapman injury in New York, out with a tattoo infection. So top 3 strangest injuries. That's what we're going to talk about. Also our question of the day. Did Rory McIlroy win the Tour Championship, or did Scotty Scheffler blew it? We'll have some more information on that. Terribly scary situation with a running back out of Washington, and still to come, Larry Fisher, Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports head of the hockey department. He is going to join us for a look at our scouting process and more. Okay, we're back in just a few minutes. Thank you so much for sticking around to Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily. My name is Dean Millard. This is the Marsh that we're looking at right now, just outside of Edmonton, Alberta. All right. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. As mentioned, my name is Dean Millard of Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. This is UFSD, Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily, where we will try to bring you the best, the most entertaining, and the most up-to-date fantasy sports news. We just spoke with Andy McNamara, head of football operations. We went through some of his rankings. If you missed it, you can check it out later on in the replay. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel. So we like to start out every show with a question of the day. And today's question has to do with what took place yesterday at the Tour Championship. Did Rory McIlroy win the Tour Championship, or did Scotty Scheffler blow it? Did he lose it, or did Rory win it? That's a question that I am asking, and I would love to hear from all of you out there when it comes to this golf tournament. If you watched it yesterday, it was wild. I mean, I did not think that we would see, and listen, the other reason I didn't think we would see it, because it wasn't like Frank Jones teeing off with Rory McIlroy. It was the world's #1 player. And a guy who was absolutely dominating during the season. Almost went wire to wire in this tournament. So, what do you think? Did Rory, did he win this tournament, or did Scotty Scheffler lose it? I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Hit me up on our message board. So, Scotty Scheffler, and he lost it. His collapse gave Rory McIlroy his third Tour Championship. The Irishman was in the news all week for helping to revamp the tour with Tiger, thanks to a players-only meeting. And then he put an absolute exclamation point on his legacy when he tracked down Scheffler, who looked like me, falling down the stairs during a party in my teenage years. Literally, it was a spectacular collapse. If I still had the Betamax tapes from my teenage parties, I would be showing you alongside Scheffler's collapse. Rory started his charge, though, on Saturday. 3 birdies in his final 6 holes to put him in the final group with Scheffler. Like, that was his first dart, throwing it down, saying, you've got company in the final round. But he started 6 shots back of the world's #1 player, and then just threw dart. Even after 7 holes, they were even. So he tracks him down, fell behind once on 15, then dropped a massive 30-foot birdie putt on the next hole. This is it right here. And this shook up Georgia. Like, the place went wild. He took the lead on 16, and then after his third shot hit the pin and Scheffler couldn't save par from 9 feet, he pulled ahead, and when Scheffler was airmailing the 18th, McIlroy had 2 putts to win it. And that's what he did. So that's my question. When you listen to all of that, how do you say that Rory McIlroy won this Tour Championship? How do you not look at it and say, yeah, that was a complete collapse by Scotty Scheffler, which is so rare. Like I said, this isn't, what the hell's Tin's Cup name? What was Tin Cup's name? Roy. This isn't Kevin Costner in the U.S. Open, where you're like, okay, I could see why that guy collapsed. It's a guy who'd been #1 the whole year. Pud Fadeco. My wife says Rory won it. Give him some credit. Yeah, Rory was excellent. He did what he needed to do. But there's no way he should have. Scheffler shot a 73. He just had to shoot like barely better than average to win. He had to shoot par to win. He couldn't do that. The number one player in the world couldn't shoot par to win. $18 million for Rory McIlroy. And like this was a career-defining week for Rory McIlroy off the golf course. The stuff that him and Tiger Woods stepped up and did, they can say what they want, that they'd been working on it for months, whatever. It's in response to LIV and everything else. They have probably saved the PGA Tour. I'm not saying LIV's going away. They got money to burn, unfortunately. But this is something that will make people stay on the PGA Tour. And it's going to make these guys a lot of money. And it cements Rory's legacy even more, that he goes out and does this after helping to save the tour. Tony says Rory had to make the shots. He did. But all Scheffler had to do was make 72 of them, and he wins. Asking the world's number one player to shoot par is not hard. What Rory did was excellent. Just blitzed it on, especially on Saturday in the final round, in the late stages. But it shouldn't even been a chance. Like Rory should have did all he did and finished one shot behind. And Scheffler was all over the place. It was army golf, left, right on the 18th hole. Not good. Okay, so our top three. Let me bring this one up here now. Our top three today is strangest injuries. And we're basing this off of the fact that the Yankees have placed their closer. Not just any reliever, but their closer, who, by the way, has not been very good this year. I don't think that's a stretch, and I don't think a Yankee fan's going to tell you anything different. But our top three is Aroldis Chapman has been placed on the injured list because he has an infection from a leg tattoo. Yeah. There is a leg tattoo putting a guy on the IL.
Child, please.
Not good. So I want to know, what are your top three most strange injuries in sports? And here are my three. Jason Pierre-Paul with the fireworks. Yeah, that was a bizarre one.
Dynamite!
Lighting off fireworks on the 4th of July blows off a couple of his fingers. And then he actually came back. He was still played. I think he's still playing with the club. Glenn Allen Hill, number 2. This goes back to like the 90s. He was a Blue Jay that was really scared of spiders, otherwise known as arachnophobia. And he had a nightmare and fell through a glass table and was out for quite a bit. And this is the most bizarre one. And who knows if it's even true. Dustin Penner hurt himself leaning over to eat pancakes.
Holy shnikes.
So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I'd love to hear your top three. Chime in on our Twitch message board. Let me know what you think. What are the top three strangest injuries out there? I got Jason Pierre-Paul with fireworks.
Dynamite!
Glenn Allen Hill with a spider nightmare falling through the table, and Dustin Penner eating pancakes. So I would love to know from your point of view, what are your top three injuries? You can also hit me up on Twitter at Duck Millard. And for all the new people joining us on Twitch, thank you so much. Pound that subscribe button. Check out our schedule, our Twitter, our social media. Learn a little bit about UFF Sports. We have our website. Chime in, say hello. Tell us where you're watching from. Love to find out where everybody is chatting with us on the show. And also chime in on the three strange injuries as our top three. So one of the big stories over the weekend, and it's a very serious and scary story, is what happened with Brian Robinson. He is a Washington Commanders. Sorry, I almost called them their old franchise name. He is the Washington Commanders running back. And this is such a wild story. He's recovering in hospital after getting shot in an attempted robbery, a carjacking. He's a Commanders rookie out of Alabama, and he was shot twice in the lower body. Unbelievable. Apparently, he's recovering. Riverboat gambler Ron Rivera, the head coach, went and saw him in hospital, said he's doing okay, but this is wild. He had emerged as the number one running back for Washington in the preseason. So things were really good. I think he's like a third-round pick or a fifth-round pick. And there was a lot of really bad jokes on social media about Antonio Gibson being behind this because he lost his job to Robinson. It's insensitive. It's far-fetched. It's something out of a Ballers episode, not real life. Not that the NFL isn't pretty wild on its own, and some things that happened in the NFL, Plaxico Burress shooting himself. But come on, man, to suggest that Gibson hired somebody to take this guy out in a carjacking is way too far-fetched. So I hope those stop. Can you imagine what it would be like for Gibson to see his name trending yesterday because of that news? I don't know. I guess the last 2 years, given what our world has been like, maybe it's, it sounds like a script that they would say, yeah, this is too far-fetched. So hopefully Brian Robinson is doing better. And honestly, as Andy and I talked about before, hopefully your fantasy draft hasn't happened. Obviously, the first concern is for this young man's health. It sounds like he's on his way to recovering. That's good. Then when you're looking at, if you've already had your draft and you're scrambling now, you're going to be having to find the back. I'm trying to think of who the backup was, because I think Gibson's gone. Unfortunately, the name escapes me who the number 3 guy would be. So that's the serious, that's like the human part of sports, where it's like, oh my God, this guy wasn't just cut, he was shot. And hopefully he recovers, and who knows when he can get back on the football field. All right, good stuff in the chat. We're going to get back into some of the fantasy talk. We're going to an announcement about tracking the draft when we come back, and we'll get into some of the best fantasy performers over the last week and last night, and still to come at the top of the hour. Larry Fisher. We're going to talk about this incredible scouting platform that we have on Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports, and some of Larry's scouting background as well. When we come back, we will talk a little bit about some top performers and whatever else you want to chat about in our Twitter chat. So please chime in on the Twitter chat. Tell me what you would like to talk about, and we'll be back in just a few seconds. All right. This is Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily. My name is Dean Millard, and it's great to have you aboard as we bring you this show from the Marsh just outside Edmonton. We asked you in our top three based on Aroldis Chapman having to go on the injured list for the Yankees, as if the Yankees had enough problems already. He's going on the injured list because of an infection due to a tattoo. Now, I heard Stephen A. Smith earlier today. He's like, you have 6 months of the offseason to get a tattoo. I'm not going to begrudge a guy for getting a tattoo during the season. Maybe he did it for some special purpose or some personal reason. But if it backfires on you, then you're going to get this. Like, you're going to get the grief. I can't imagine what like sports radio is like in New York today over this. And so we're asking you for your top three injury stories. Dad Omes says Lionel Simmons, tendonitis by way of Nintendo Game Boy, out 2 games. That was funny. His hand blew up. He couldn't play, couldn't grip a basketball. Bobby Crookshanks, lacerations from golf cart sent by God. And he says, overjoyed, Bobby threw his club in the air, exclaiming, thank you, Lord, only for it to clatter down on his head. This required several stitches and meant he played the final 7 holes in 5 over par to finish third. That is a good one, as is Tony. Yeah, for sure. There's some bizarre. Trevor Bauer recently was fixing his drone. This was a few recent years. Obviously, we remember the Grammatica. There's so many in football. Bill Grammatica celebrating, pulled his hamstring. Gus Farrat with the headbutt into the end zone there. That was a bizarre one. And like I said, the off-season ones, when they tell you these stories, they're like, did Dustin Penner make that up, or did he seriously do it? Like, I suffered a hernia from sneezing, so maybe it does happen. I don't know. Bizarre. Really weird injuries. So keep them coming. Some good stuff. Thank you so much for everybody joining us on this Twitch channel. Please chime in. Tell us where you're watching from on the message board. Love to have everybody joining in and chatting with us. We're here Monday to Friday, 4 to 6 Eastern. We've got another great, a lot of great program coming up, like Andy's show, as we mentioned in our conversation, 11 a.m. Eastern on Sundays, Ultimate Fantasy Football, UFHL Now. So much more good programming coming up on the way here on Ultimate Fantasy Sports, our Twitch channel. The other story that I wanted to talk about, where is here? Oh, yeah. Tracking the Draft is coming back for another season. Craig Button and myself will be back. We don't have an exact date, most likely first week of October, but don't hold me to that. And we're really excited about it because Craig is so fun to be on the air with. He's so passionate, knowledgeable, gracious with his time, and I'm really excited. Not only does he help out with this franchise here, Duckman's Domination, but he also helps out with high-level scouting with my wife's scouting agency, and he obviously gives his time for Tracking the Draft. So we will be back with Craig this year once again, most likely on Wednesdays. Not 100% sure exactly, but we'll sort out the details. And what we're going to do is we usually record it earlier in the day. We'll have some segments on here during the show that'll kind of give you a preview, and then we'll put the episode out later. But really, really excited to be working with Craig Button on Tracking the Draft once again, where we take you through the 2023 draft for sure, and probably take a look back at 2022 and maybe a look ahead to 2024 as well. We'll try to cover all the bases if we can. Dad Omis is watching from the Bay Area, loving the show. Thank you so much, and I love the top threes that you chimed in on, so that is awesome to be getting that kind of reaction. Andy Mack says, I legit once pulled my hamstring that needed physio from getting up too fast after playing MLB The Show PS3 for 4 hours straight. That's pretty legendary. So yeah, listen, and listen, baseball players, especially pitchers, they're thoroughbreds, man. Like they fingernail is off, and you might think, oh, a fingernail, but when you try to throw a curveball or a knuckleball or anything else like that, you need everything. So a hangnail is actually a super annoying and probably painful injury for a pitcher, more so than a hockey player or a football player, so to speak. So that's what we're talking about with our top 3 injuries, strange injuries when it comes to the top 3. We're going to get into things with Larry Fisher on the other side of our next break, but want to give you some top shelf fantasy performers of the night. And how about the Padres? Manny Machado, he's also of the Scorpions in UFLB, and the Padres scored 7 and still lost. Like, they can't get out of their own way, despite Manny Machado having a night. 21 points off going 4 for 5 with a couple of homers and 4 RBIs, an OPS of 3. And Isaac Parady's also chiming in. He of the Rays and the Arctic Eagles in UFLB also had a 21-point night. He went 2 for 2, but also had a couple of walks, 2 home runs, 3 RBIs, and an OPS of 5. On the hill, Max Scherzer of the Mets, in a losing cause for the White Walkers, was getting it done. 16.5 points thanks to a quality start, 11 Ks, and a whip of just over .7. Still at 199 career wins for Max. And Herman Marquez of the Rockies and Moonshots had 16 points thanks to a win quality start, 5 Ks, and he's the guy who beat Max Scherzer. As for performers of the week, as we wrapped up another week and marched toward the playoffs, of course, in UFLB, we have full seasons and playoffs. Nate Lowe, I'm loving this guy in my one. Like, I am last in my one fantasy league as we're rebuilding in baseball, but Nate Lowe has been a great surprise for us in that league, and same for the Scorpions in UFLB. Nate Lowe of the Rangers, 40.5 points this week, .385 average, hit 4 home runs, 11 RBIs, and an OPS of 1.330. Mookie Betts of the Dodgers and the Aviators, just behind him at 37.5 points, 4 homers, 7 RBIs, a whip of over 1.3. On the hill, former Jay Cy Young winner Robbie Ray of the Mariners with a 30-point week, couple of wins, couple of quality starts, 14 Ks. And Justin Verlander, you know, if you're the Macaws, you're like, eh. Oh, by the way, Robbie Ray, talented starter for the Black Bears. Justin Verlander of the Macaws, great week, 27.25 points, a win, a quality start, 16 Ks, but he did leave last night's game with a right calf issue. So if you have Justin Verlander, you're going to have some time because obviously he started on Sunday, but although he only went a few innings, so maybe he could pitch earlier. Keep an eye on that. If for whatever silly reason you're still in a weekly league, first of all, get out of it because weekly leagues are awful. But watch for this with Justin Verlander and whether or not he makes his next start. You know, he's the leading Cy Young winner or contender for me. He's just had an outstanding season. So check that out. Make sure you know what's happening with Justin Verlander when it comes to his injury. All right, we're going to have Fantasy Thunderdome in just a little bit later on in the program. But when we come back, Larry Fisher is going to join us. We're going to talk about this awesome scouting program that we have here on Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports, how you can get involved, how Larry got involved in covering the prospects, and still to come, we'll have our NHL preview featuring the Anaheim Ducks today. We'll take a look at the Ducks roster, fantasy contenders, and potential breakout players. That, Fantasy Thunderdome, Larry Fisher, and games to watch, all still to come here. We'll take a short break. We'll be back with Larry right after this. All right, this is Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily. My name is Dean Millard, and it's a pleasure to be on the air with you Monday to Friday, 4 to 6 Eastern, as we talk about fantasy and what you need to know. By the way, Andy McNamara just pointing out on Twitter, or throwing out a tweet from Ian Rappaport, that the Dolphins have released running back Sonny Michel, among other things. So if you're preparing for your football draft tonight, as I will be, something that you should need to know: Sonny Michel is no longer a member of the Miami Dolphins. All right, we're going to talk a little hockey now, and scouting in particular, as I bring in a guy I'm normally joined with on UFHL, our insider Larry Fisher. How are you, Larry? You know what? I didn't... just wait, let me turn your mic on, Larry. It's a lot better if people can hear you. There we go. It's a lot better when people can hear you. So operator error, but welcome to UFSD. How are you?
Great, Dean, and a great first hour to the show. Tuned in, and always good when you have Andy Mack on. He's spitting fire. He's pumped for the NFL season, but of course the UFAFL season 2 on the UFF platform. And like I said, even news like a Sonny Michel and stuff like that is going to impact somebody in UFAFL. But thanks to the UFAFL, it's kind of revived my interest and my following in NFL football. So I'm even a little excited with the NFL season, just a week or two away now. So, and college football starting this week. But yeah, then you think, look ahead, Dean, and we're only a couple weeks away from NHL training camps starting. 2 weeks away, basically. Me and Jamie Thomas, who's the scouting director on the football side, will be down in Penticton at the Young Stars Classic, the Vancouver Canucks prospect tournament, where Jamie will be there with the Jets. And so, the off season is short-lived in hockey this year, with the World Juniors being in August, and then we'll be back in a rink before long.
Yeah, no doubt. Training camps for junior hockey already underway, so it is a shorter and shorter time, especially with how the last year and so has been so compacted. But, you and I first came to meet each other when I was on the Pipeline Show with Guy Flaming, and that was, totally about prospects. Where is your love of prospects come from, and what kind of first got you interested in that side of the sport?
Yeah, I think playing hockey growing up, my little hometown in Saskatchewan had back-to-back Memorial Cups. We had a lot of guys, average, classroom was like 10 guys per grade. Like, that's how small population, 600 people. And for a while there, like 5 out of the 10 guys every year were going to play in the WHL. It was just a ridiculous feeder system. So I became obsessed with the WHL Bantam draft, following it from, probably 12 years old on up, and playing a ton of fantasy hockey as well. But the prospect side, I got, really into scouting the Bantam draft, my peers essentially, who was going to be the next one from my, west central area of Saskatchewan, and knowing the rest of the province. And then when I went to Lethbridge in 2002, 20 years ago, which sounds crazy. We just had our 20-year high school reunion now. But that's where I really got into the, being right there with the WHL. And Brent Seabrook was there. Chris Versteeg was there. The Hurricanes were terrible. They got spanked by the Medicine Hat Tigers consistently. But a buddy of mine growing up, Derek Tigers, so I knew him. And actually, that's where I got to meet Guy Flaming, was in Lethbridge. He came down he was still with Hockey's Future, and needed me to hook him up with some press passes so he could go interview. Actually, at the time was Joffrey Lupul, an Edmonton kid, and Jay Bomeister was with the Tigers. So yeah, it's kind of crazy, Dean, when you think about that, because all these names I'm throwing out, that feels like yesterday, and they're all retired. None of those guys are still playing now. Even a guy like Braden Holtby, who I got to know when I was in Lloydminster really well, covered his midget AAA and his Saskatoon Blades career and on to the NHL, and obviously the big paddle save against Vegas in the Stanley Cup final, and gets his cup ring and all that he's accomplished. Guys like that, right, that I kind of grew up with, are all now getting out of the game. And now we see the drafting, all the next generation guys that, their dads didn't feel like that long ago, and now they're getting drafted and they're playing at the World Juniors. So, but yeah, I've been a prospect junkie since my early teens, for sure.
It's so, you think Jay Bomeister, you think, I watched him come into the career, his career with Medicine Hat. He was, a well-known kid across Western Canada. Like, he was skating with the Golden Bears when he was 14, and his dad was the coach, and he didn't look out of place. And now he's obviously retired, unfortunately. his agent is my lawyer, and he's no longer in the agent game. So now we're really coming full circle where the agents aren't even in the game anymore. So that's when I really start feeling a lot older. But the one thing that is really cool about our platform is you don't have to work for a WHL team or a Junior A team or an NHL team or any team if you don't want to become a scout. So let's get into this amazing platform that we have at UFFS, and kind of in a nutshell, explain the scouting platform and how that works for somebody maybe who has never heard of that.
It's a great opportunity, Dean, to learn how to scout, and we got a lot of real world people involved in all the sports. I mean, basketball, baseball, football, hockey, but a great way to learn scouting and a great way to have a vested interest in these prospects, because there's tons of aspiring scouts all across the sporting world that are putting out rankings and mock drafts, and all their sharing different content on Twitter is huge for the scouting community. But what we've done is we've created a way for aspiring scouts to monetize their eye for talent, is what I like to say. But basically, registering prospects on the blockchain, as in hockey, as young as 14 turning 15 years old, the Bantam draft or the WHL prospects draft, age group 3 years out from their NHL draft. We have an annual futures auction in hockey where the top 64 or soon to be maybe the top 96 of an age group are draft spots are auctioned off to scouts to the highest bidder, and then they select any player prospect they want from that draft year. We just did the 2025 draft class, Dean, which are kids born up to September 15th, 2007. So that's how young we are on the hockey side, which adds a whole nother element of skill and intrigue and actually having to physically scout these kids, because there's not a lot of information available online yet. And I think that's what our scouts really love on the hockey side, is the actual ability to find these kids and unearth, the hidden gems, and then be able to say, instead of saying, oh yeah, there was my tweet from, 2016 on so-and-so,
Mm-hmm.
now you can say, here's my portfolio essentially on the UFFS platform. And, we have some scouts that have over 200 prospects, and we have some scouts that have 10 or 5. And it's a really unique opportunity to, like I said, have a vested interest in these prospects' careers. And obviously the way it works from the gameplay side is if they develop real world value and they become relevant in the NHL, then we have the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League, and your prospects are going to graduate to that level or graduate to the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors, probably the only dynasty league for the World Juniors.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting up the Ultimate Fantasy American Hockey League this fall or this winter for the UFAHL. So 3 levels of hockey that if your players progress into that, you're going to get some sort of an ROI, a return on your investment. So you get that vested interest, and you also get the gameplay of potentially monetizing your eye for talent.
Yeah, and we just had the oddly summer edition of the World Juniors, which meant the UFWJ. So a scout is getting return on investment there as well, and again in December. So it really is a terrific. How many scouts are there in hockey, and how many hockey players have been registered, Larry?
Yeah, so we got 67 active scouts in hockey that own at least one prospect or have registered at least one player. And then, total, we have almost 5,000. I'm waiting for who's going to be the lucky number 5,000 prospect that gets registered on the hockey side of the platform. But right now we're just in that, almost 4,900. I think we're at 4,890. 4,890 prospects. When you think about it, Dean, there's only 750 players in the NHL at any given time. And same with the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. And that's something to clarify, because when you talk about scouting for UFFS and somebody looks it up and they see Ultimate Fantasy, Franchise Fantasy Sports, they right away think, well, what does that mean? How am I scouting for fantasy? But I always tell people on the scouting side, it's still real world scouting, because the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League, the UFHL, mirrors the NHL and 32 franchises, 50 contracts. Now this, in September, we're talking about reserve lists to mirror the NHL for unsigned players, unsigned draft prospects. So it's going to be really interesting that basically anybody that's on the NHL radar will be on the UFHL radar. So, and again, when you're, scouting on the UFFS platform, there's kind of 2 ways to go about it. You can target the somewhat household names and invest a little more through the futures auction, thinking that you're increasing your odds of having a top 10 pick or a first round pick. Or like I said, you can try to find these late bloomers and these hidden gems, and then you might have to bide your time and wait a little bit, because it's no different than the real world. If you're getting a prospect that's drafted in the 3rd or 5th or 7th round of the NHL draft, they're probably not going to make it for a few years, and you're going to be sitting on that asset. But at the same time, again, that's that vested interest of, wow, now he made the World Juniors as a 7th rounder, and wow, now he's signed his first pro contract. Like, you really get the feel of both being a scout and to some degree an agent. If they aren't selected in the UFHL entry auction, now you almost turn into that player's agent, trying to promote them and highlight their successes and graduate them to a UFHL protected list or reserve list that could be coming. So very similar, though. That's the thing. It's real world scouting. You're scouting for a fantasy league, but generally, and again, Dean, you know as well as anybody, we try to emulate the real world value as closely as possible, because it is a full salary cap league in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. So you got to get the scoring system to where the contract in the real world makes sense for their fantasy production. And again, so as a scout, you're not looking at scouting for fantasy. You're just scouting who's going to be the best players in the NHL in the future, because those will be the same players that have the most value in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League.
I think something you said earlier, it's a way for people to kind of build their resume, whatever it is. Kind of a way for armchair scouts or people who want to become scouts possibly to measure themselves against some pros, because the open market, there are auctions, but the open market is $20 worth of score coin, which is our in-game currency. So that kind of levels the playing field. And I think we have some impressive scouts. Like, we have some pretty impressive names. I'm privileged that Craig Button works with us. Peter Labardius, Sam Cosentino are in the scouting world on the hockey side. There are some Ash Glover from the Medicine Hat Tigers. There's some really terrific people, but there's also some people that are getting into this, to measure themselves and are doing a pretty good job.
People are doing a great job, Dean. I look at Jeff Ray as a guy who was with Dobber Prospects and now with Draft in Europe with Mick Portoni, but a guy who's originally from Canada, now over in France, but very close to Switzerland, Germany, follows that Central Europe really closely, but has a pretty good finger on the pulse of Europe in general. And those first couple of years of scouting on the UFFS platform, Jeff cleaned up on Euros that now you watch the Hlinka Gretzky Cup this summer and you're going, wow, there's that guy. Let's see if he's been registered. Oh yeah, Jeff Ray had him in September of 2020. Like, he's just been ahead of the game on the Euros. And then in North America, you mentioned guys like Ash Glover, who does this for a living for the Medicine Hat Tigers. He's looking at who they should draft in the CHL import draft next year. He's looking at, guys, obviously he knows the Bantam or the WHL prospects upcoming draft class as well as anybody, because that's his full-time job. But so you have people that are already established in the scouting world, and you have a ton of people that are aspiring scouts looking for a way to make a name for themselves with, like I said, a resume of sorts on the blockchain. The one thing about the blockchain is you can't, I always, and even myself probably guilty of it a little bit, but when you're looking back at your rankings and stuff or your mock drafts, you always highlight the hits and you try to downplay or ignore the misses. But here on the blockchain, if you don't make the right move, it's still going to be there. It's part of your legacy on the UFFS platform. So it highlights the hits and the misses, but certainly it's a great way to really test yourself against people that are already established in the industry and networking, Dean. Our Telegram community in the scouting side, a lot of great minds in there that are networking and learning from each other. And a lot of our scouts end up getting involved with the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League to feel like they're a part of a team as an affiliated scout or a hockey operations role. So it's a great way to, and even for people that were in the game and then out of the game, it's a great way to keep your skills sharp, because you got to know everybody from that, like I said, 3 draft classes out in the NHL all the way up to the current players. So, and we have, like I said, out of those 50 plus scouts, a great group of hockey minds, and I'm learning every day. And I think you nailed it, Dean, with the open market, because I always call it finders keepers, but it's first come, first serve. You have that annual futures auction that you auction off, the top 64, 2 rounds worth of prospects for the new draft class or the new class you're introducing to UFFs. After that, the rest of that group is open market, as well as, all these other years that are now released all the way out to 2025 and those 2007 birth dates. So, Arnie just registered a guy from Ontario the other day, a 15-year-old defenseman. And, it's just so interesting for myself as the scouting director in hockey to to go down those wormholes and really learn about all these kids that, I think I know a lot of hockey players, but I don't know 4,890 hockey players. I mean, it's incredible how widespread it is. And like I said, we got scouts in Europe. We got scouts that are doing U.S. high school hockey. We got scouts in all the different CHL regions. So it's a learning experience for all of us, and great networking opportunities, and really a place to kind of prove yourself as an aspiring scout.
And if you want more information, there's Larry's Twitter handle on there, LarryFisher_KDC. You can get more information at UFFsports.com. What's the scouting Twitter handle as well for everybody, Larry?
Yeah, it's at UFHL_scouting. So that's a great place to follow as well. We have we're always sharing kind of the big news in the hockey scouting world, which again, European leagues are already going. There's big trade in the WHL today. Mats Lindgren on the move from the Memorial Cup host Kamloops Blazers to the Red Deer Rebels for Kyle Masters, who was drafted. They're both fourth-round picks, but they're swapped. Apparently, Mats Lindgren requested a trade, which his dad was Mats Lindgren as well, the former Oilers two-way center. But interesting that they wanted out of Kamloops heading into Memorial Cup year, and now he'll be in Red Deer, which should have a contending team as well. But Kyle Masters and a first-round pick going the other way. So no different than the UFHL. There is no real never sleeps. We've got some blockbuster trades in the UFHL today. We got, the competition committee's been announced for the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. So, or introduced. So yeah, it's quite even though it's the dog days of summer and winding down the days in August, the hockey world's ramping up for another season.
Every time, you know what, as soon as the U.S. Open starts, I know crazy stuff is going to happen in hockey, because it's like the end of summer and then the fall rolls in and you get into hockey. So I knew as soon as I saw the U.S. Open had begun, there's going to be some bizarre stuff. So the platform UFFS recently was looking at making some changes to the scouting, which I believe would have actually increased the ROI, in my opinion. But it was met with kind of a resounding no from owners and scouts. Maybe you want, it's hard to sometimes figure out what's going on in Telegram back and forth. Maybe do you want to explain what the idea was, and who knows, maybe it might resurface down the road as we grow and things like that. But this was done to try and create more revenue for the scouts, was it not?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. Was there's kind of 5 points that we're trying to hammer on, and that's attract more scouts to the platform, generate more scout-to-scout transactions, trades and sales, because there hasn't been a ton of scout-to-scout activity, and then obviously increase or more ROI for scouts, bigger prize pools, and more revenue for the platform. It's kind of a five potential benefits to the two proposed changes, which would have saw an end to direct sales. No more direct sales, where it essentially is our entry-level contract as far as a feeder system and cost certainty for our professional franchises to have their affiliated scouts and have them sort of stockpile or we say hoard prospects, hoard talent down there, and then have that feeder system coming in where they identify the talent the scouts do, and your franchise, if they don't get selected in the entry auction, they're earmarked essentially for your franchise. Based on the feedback, Dean, that was the biggest, and then the other part of it was the changing the entry auction, which is our version of the NHL draft, from groupings of 5 franchises with an algorithm setting the minimum bids to just a free market, where your draft pick that you'd have in a standard fantasy league, all that guaranteed you was the right to match the winning bid on each spot, but every franchise could bid on all 64 or 96 spots, 2 or 3 rounds worth of prospects. So again, that would have the higher the bidding goes, with more bidders, you're going to get higher sale prices, which is going to give you bigger prize pools, better ROI for the scout, and obviously more revenue for the platform as well. Win, win, win. But again, the pushback, the feedback was in large part, Dean, and this is where I can see their side, is the realism. The most realistic fantasy sports platform. The NHL draft is a standard draft. So to have it as an auction, even in groupings of 5, is so different than any other fantasy league. But if you don't have that, how do the scouts get their ROI on the investment they made in the futures auction in the open market? So it is an auction, but it's still in the groupings of 5 is reverse order of standings with a draft lottery, just like the NHL. And all our sports are set up the same: football, basketball, baseball as well. But reverse order of standings. So essentially you're rebuilding franchises, still do have if they don't trade their pick, they still have the best chance to get the Connor Bedard in 2023 or the Matvei Mishkov, the next big stars, right? As well as obviously, if the like I said, if the players pass through that entry auction, if they're not taken in the top 2 rounds, then the franchises really do have a feeder system, no different than the NHL, where you don't see, Connor Bedard's going to get drafted in 2023, probably first overall, Dean. Shane Wright, Juraj Slafkovsky, all these guys, when they sign their entry-level contract in the NHL, they're not starting at 10 million or 8 million, even if they're that good of a talent. All of them are starting at 1 million or less. So on the UFFS platform, our entry-level contract to sign players to their ELC from a scout is 25 USD worth of score coin. And then obviously there's different implications with affiliations there. But basically that feeder system of cost certainty to mirror the real world, again, that realism aspect of the parity that you get from a reverse order of standings draft. Ideally, again, a lot of the sometimes you see, and it's no different in the NHL, but sometimes you see the rebuilding franchises are the small market franchises, and they can't afford to bid on the top prospects, so they will trade their draft pick. We've seen a bit of that across all the leagues, but again, it's set up in a way that rebuilding franchises could use their draft pick to get the best prospects because they'd be in that grouping of 5 at the bottom of the stand, as well as obviously, you get the right scouts. And that's one cool thing is some franchises have hired 3, 4, 5 different scouts, regional scouts, just like NHL teams. So they have a scout watching kids in Ontario. They have a scout watching kids in the West, one in Europe, whatever. And then they collect their intelligence, and then they develop that feeder system when to bring them up to the protected list or now potentially the reserve list. But I think that the resounding no was that they felt parity and realism were the 2 things that it becomes a rich man's game. The rich get richer, and which, for everybody, the rich get richer, whether it's prize pool money for franchises, ROI for scouts, or platform revenue. That's probably a good thing. But there was a resounding no on the feedback based on, losing a bit of the realism, harder for small market franchises to compete if they don't have that cost certainty on their feeder system, and they're not guaranteed to at least be bidding against only 5 competitors. Now they got to watch 31 others bid and be able to come over the top with a matching offer on a 5-6 figure sale. It's going to be tough for somebody to grab Connor Bedard in that situation as a rebuilding franchise. So I think it could resurface, Dean, but generally speaking, realism and parity were the 2 reasons that the franchises and the scouts wanted to avoid making those type of big picture changes at this time.
Okay, so you mentioned Bedard, and Be Bad for Bedard is out there. I'm sure Chicago will have it on billboards or something. I'm sure the Bentley Jacks will have it on billboards as well because they have Connor Bedard, their scout, as we just talked about in affiliation. But who else should people be focused on? Because Bedard is great, and I'm sure he will go number 1. But this is looking like it could be an astronomical draft, similar to the 03 draft, which I think a lot of people consider one of the best.
For sure, and what a coincidence, 20 years later, 2023 would be kind of the cyclical. I mean, 2015 was an awesome draft too, but you're right. This has the potential to rival 2015 and 2003 with Connor Bedard as the marquee name at the top. And, some people say, well, he's a 5'9" winger, but then watch him shoot the puck and watch him take over against guys that are 3 years older than him at the World Juniors, right? So it's impressive. He's the real deal. We saw what he did in the WHL as a 16-year-old. He's done this every step of the way in his career. It would be surprising if he wasn't the first overall pick. He's the consensus going into the draft. The one guy that would have challenged him, Dean, if he didn't have a passport from Russia, would be Matvei Mishkov. He's been, a lot of Ovechkin's records that he set: youngest player in the KHL, youngest player to score a goal in the KHL, most points at this tournament and that tournament. Mishkov's breaking Ovechkin's records, and we know how good Ovechkin and Crosby are. Mishkov and Bedard are kind of the again, McDavid's in there and Matthews and stuff too, but they're kind of the next coming of the Crosby and Ovechkin rivalry as far as a Canadian prospect and a Russian prospect. They're the 1-2 right now, Dean. But again, that passport issue and the fact that Mishkov's hurt, the fact that Russia won't be at the World Juniors again in December, a little bit of out of sight, out of mind. I mean, if he tears up the KHL and the KHL playoffs and maybe plays, or I guess they're not at the men's worlds next year either for IIHF. I don't think Russia is. So it's going to be hard for him to get that best on best exposure. But you got guys like Adam Fantilli, who is probably going to be at the World Juniors for East End, the country East End at the UFWJ in December. That'll be a big showcase for him. We'll see what he does below the border. But obviously, the WHL is a great class with Zach Benson and Braden Yeager and Riley Height, and the OHL with Callum Ritchie and Cameron Allen. And, it's forward heavy. I don't think there's really a lot of defensemen in the top 10. Sweden has a couple of guys, Leo Carlson, Otto Stenberg. We've seen a guy from Finland, Kasper Halttunen, looked really good at the Holinka. Obviously, a Czechia player, Edward Sale or Saleh, however you want to say it. He looked super dynamic, super explosive at the Holinka. Looks like he's going to be a top 10. And again, you start rattling off these names, and all of a sudden you're 25, 35, 45 deep, and you're still saying it should be a top 10. A lot of these guys that are going to be outside the top 15 in 2023 probably would have been challenging for top 5 picks in this year's draft class. So very exciting to be a scout heading into this 2023 draft year.
Yeah, no doubt. Really excited. The track in the draft will be coming back probably first week of October. I enjoy picking Craig's brain about that, and then going back to my notes, and it's the same thing. It's like, how do I rank these 25 guys in the top 10? But it's always fun, and it's always fun to be able to do that. And we'll be able to talk about it a lot more on UFHL Now, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. when we do get back into the season, and we'll have some watch parties right here, twitch.tv/ultimate Fantasy Sports. And of course, you are the UFHL insider. Looking forward to getting that show back on again. Larry, thanks as always for joining me. I love chatting hockey with you. We could do it for literally 12 hours a day, I think. So it's always good to get you on. And I look forward to continuing to build this platform into what it really can be. Thanks so much, my man.
Thanks, Dean, and looking forward to seeing what Duckman's Domination has up their sleeve between now and start of training camp, start of another season in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. One of the franchises on the rise. We've seen the North Stars make another big move today, trading away Jake DeBrusk, who they had just acquired this offseason. But yeah, the trade winds are blowing in the UFHL still, so can't wait to get UFHL Now get back into that insider role, because definitely lots happening between now and the start of October.
Outstanding. There is Larry Fisher, who is the head of our hockey department on UFFS and oversees all the scouting and does so much work. It's unbelievable. The one thing we didn't get to, we'll try to get Larry on quite a bit. We'll go through some of his list of favorite players that he's covered over the years. He's been in the media for 20 years and has seen some really good players, especially come through that Kelowna market. That is for sure. Okay, when we get back, we're going to get into our NHL preview. Our first team, the Anaheim Ducks, brought to you by Dobber Hockey. We'll touch on who are some stars, some sleepers, some breakouts, and what the Ducks lines might look like, as well as UFHL teams that are excited about some of these players. This is Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Ultimate Fantasy Sports. We're back in 2 minutes.
The last half hour of today's show, first show of the week, off to a flying start. If you missed it earlier, Andy McNamara, head of football, gave out some of his rankings, joined us for talk a little fantasy football chatter. If you have your draft tonight, which I do, and Larry Fisher just was our guest as he joined us to talk about the scouting platform here on Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. We're here Monday to Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern. If you are watching this on a replay, we're live 4 to 6 on Twitch, twitch.tv/Ultimate Fantasy Sports. And if you're watching it live and you want to see something that you missed, you can catch our YouTube channel, Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, and you can catch all of our shows in podcast form. Just search for Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. We're going to talk a little NHL preview now, as 32 weekdays from now, the NHL season will kick off in North America. They're starting the season on the 7th and 8th, but we are starting our previews today, and we'll take you right up until the 11th. And we're starting with the Ducks in Anaheim. And by the way, these team previews are brought to you by Dobber Hockey. You can see the new fantasy profile from Dobber Hockey, and there they have their Anaheim Ducks. The lines that the Ducks are going with, a little bit different than the ones that you can find at Puckpedia. But the top 3 stars in fantasy, for me anyway, Trevor Zegras, no doubt about it, Troy Terry, and Cam Fowler on the back end, who was still like almost a 45-point defenseman last year, even though, it's funny, Larry and I talking about guys that are older. This guy was just in the Memorial Cup 12 years ago, and now we're talking about this veteran, not producing as much, but certainly I think he is still producing. Anyway, I think he can produce. The breakout player, I don't think anybody is going to, if you just watch the World Juniors, you saw what Mason McTavish can do. He was an absolute horse during that tournament, produced in the offensive zone and made that, somebody said it should be a heritage moment for Canada, the game saver, which oddly enough ended up giving us the Ultimate Fantasy World Junior in a bizarre way that would take way too long to explain. But if you watch our Ultimate Fantasy World Junior wrap-up show or head to the news section at UFFsports.com and read Larry's recap, you'll figure it out. It was bizarre. So I think Mason McTavish is the breakout player. He played everywhere last year. It'll be interesting to see certainly, where the Ducks end up putting him in their lineup. This lineup from Puckpedia has him on the second line, and I'm just going to check and see where they have him on the second line as well. So I think that
Ducks team, way they're going is going to be so fun to watch with Zegras, or obviously Zegras, but Zellweger is going to be there, Drysdale. And the sleeper for me is Kevin Shattenkirk on the blue line, simply because it's a contract year. He's a hot starter. So when you look at this and you relate it to our league, Red Army's loving it because they got Zegras and Fowler, two guys at the other end of the spectrum. The Yetis are loving Troy Terry, and the CanWest Generals with Mason McTavish are going to be an absolute force with some of their young players in the next couple of years. Kevin Shattenkirk is a member of the Ice Vikings in the UFHL. The Ducks obviously have struggled. They've been learning from a new coach in the last couple of years in Dallas Aikens. I think the Ducks are not a playoff contender, but I think the Ducks are a fun team when it just comes to strictly fantasy. Like when you are looking at just fantasy, you've got, and I guess the difference between the Puckpedia and the Dobber Hockey is Adam Henrique is in this top line, and Frank Vetrano is the puck, or is the Dobber Hockey. So, and Vetrano's on the second line. This is I think an exciting team for fantasy perspective. What is Drysdale going to do? Can Jakob Silfverberg recover from the blood clotting in his leg last year? He was on a tear to start the season. Like, I don't mind that third line. You've got a little bit of a veteran, but like I said, Zegras and Terry are the linchpins up front. Fowler on the back end, but you've got Drysdale. What is he going to do? What is Ryan Strome going to do on a new deal? What is Mason McTavish going to do in his rookie season? So, and then John Gibson. Is John Gibson still an elite fantasy goaltender? Well, not if you're expecting wins, because I still don't think they're going to get a lot of wins. But the Ducks are a really fun, exciting team to watch in fantasy. And if you are in any kind of rebuilding mode going into your fantasy hockey season, I would be targeting some of these players, depending on how deep your league is and how many rookies you might have available. This is an excellent, exciting team on the rise when it comes to fantasy. And they're probably going to be a year or two behind when it comes to actually getting it done in the NHL playoffs. But when it comes to fantasy, these guys are going to be making an impact way sooner than you think. John Klingberg is there. I like it. I really like the makeup of this team from a fantasy perspective. They're in a division that I think the Oilers and the Flames are going to battle it out for first in that division. I think Vegas will obviously have something to say about it. The Ducks are, I think, at least a year, maybe two away from competing still. But from a fantasy perspective, like I said, I would be looking at guys like, if you're rebuilding, McTavish, Zegras and Terry will already be on teams, but Drysdale, McTavish, and I think Shattenkirk is a guy that you can grab early and trade him, because he'll fall off like he does, like clockwork. But grab a guy like Shattenkirk at some point in your draft just for the express purposes of trading him before the All-Star break. That's the one thing I would do. The biggest piece of advice if you're drafting members of the Anaheim Ducks is get Shattenkirk and trade him before the All-Star break, before he falls off, because he usually does do that. So there you go. You can find Dobber Hockey and their wonderful preview. It's full of amazing information. I really like it. I was really enjoying going through it the other night and checking it out. We've been giving away some Dobber Hockey prospect guides, and it's excellent. So we're really looking forward to this partnership with Dobber Hockey. I would encourage you to look them up, whether it's your prospects that you're looking for or if it's looking for some fantasy advice. Their guide is excellent, and we will be presenting the NHL team-by-team previews sponsored by Dobber Hockey. Every day we have a show, Monday to Friday, right up until October 11th. So the season will have started. We'll make sure we get San Jose and Nashville in before they head overseas for that one. So thank you very much to Dobber Hockey for sponsoring our previews of NHL franchises. And like I said, in the UFHL, the Red Army has been a contender, but to watch what Trevor Zegras is going to do in the next couple of years is awesome, and to see what Mason McTavish is going to do for the CanWest Generals, who have been stockpiling young players, is excellent. So just remember, if the Yetis or if the Ice Vikings reach out to you after the All-Star break about Kevin Shattenkirk, look at the track record, because he's sort of fallen off the cliff at times in the past. But I think he'll have a great start. And if you're in a fantasy team, grab this guy, trade him before the All-Star break. All right, one more time to duck out, grab a drink of water. When we come back, we will have Fantasy Thunderdome and what to watch tonight when it comes to sports and other. This is Ultimate Fantasy Sports Daily on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network here on twitch.tv/Ultimate Fantasy Sports. All right, final segment of the show coming up right now. We're going to close off with our Fantasy Thunderdome, and we'll get into some things to watch tonight, games to watch when it comes to the sporting world. We just previewed the Anaheim Ducks. I love it. Larry saying on our Twitch message board that fitting that the Ducks were the first team preview, team on the rise like Duckman's domination in the UFHL. Maybe it was a coincidence. I'm not really sure. I think we are on the rise. I'm looking forward to hopefully adding a playoff spot, and then we'll see where we go. We certainly have been busy in this off season. That is for sure. Okay, so we are now going to close things out. We're going to get into a couple of fun things and then send you on your very way. Right now, though, it is time for Fantasy Thunderdome, where you will decide who will win. 2 players enter, 1 leaves. Who would you take? It is Fantasy Thunderdome. 2 players enter, 1 leaves. Here's the 2 players we're going with when it comes to the National Football League. Josh Allen or Justin Herbert. Now, if you remember back to Andy's rankings, he had these guys 1-2. So, obviously, Josh Allen has a little bit more, like double the career, like 4 years compared to the 2 from Herbert, but he wasn't as dominant, certainly, in his first 2 years. I mean, he's had 37 and 36 touchdown seasons in the last 2 years. That's pretty awesome, and that's in the air. Herbert was the Rookie of the Year. Pretty impressive. I think right now, this is probably fairly safe to say that you're taking Allen, but for their career, which quarterback do you think will have the better fantasy career? Take into account how they play, where they play. I love Josh Allen. I think he is awesome to watch. But if I'm betting on a guy long-term to avoid the injuries, it might not be him that I'm picking. So, would love to hear your thoughts. Who do you take long-term? Is it the guy in Buffalo or the guy in LA? So you tell me. Chime in at Duck Millard on Twitter, or you can also chime in on our Twitch chat as well in the message boards. Here's the other ways you can get in touch with us. UFS Network or UFF Sports on Twitter. UFF Sports Official on Instagram. The website is UFFsports.com, and you can send us an email to find out information, info@UFFsports.com. So again, Fantasy Thunderdome, who are you going with? Long-term for their whole career. Don't just take into account the first 4 years or first 2 years. It's been awesome, but who do you got long-term? Hit us up in the message board in Twitch. We'd love to hear your thoughts there. Or you can get us at our various different social medias. And while you're on Twitch, all you got to do is you hit that subscribe, you hit that like button, you follow us, you scroll down, you see all of our socials, our schedule, and everything. We're here Monday to Friday, 4 to 6 Eastern. We got Andy McNamara on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern. You got Larry Fisher and myself on UFHL Now on Wednesdays at 6 Eastern. I'll be back with Inside UFLB on Sundays. That'll come your way at 5 p.m. Eastern, and then either before or after the watch parties. We'll go with that. Larry saying circa bet on Justin Herbert, took him second overall in the UFAFL draft last year at this time, to some surprise at the time, but he was great for the Trout in their perfect 17-0 season. Almost the Miami Dolphins of 72. Mahomes, Herbert, Allen went 1, 2, 3 overall in that dynasty league. Yeah, and if you looked at Andy's rankings earlier today, Mahomes was 4, just ahead of Brady. So long term, I love Josh Allen. I just don't know if Josh Allen is going to play as long as Herbert. So we'll see. I like them both, and you know, if you're probably looking at a guy right now, you're probably saying Josh Allen, but there might be people saying Herbert as well right now as well. I'll go with Herbert. I think he's the potential to play longer. Like I said, I love the fact that Josh Allen does what he does. But I'll go with the other guy. All right, wrapping up the show today with games to watch tonight. I don't know, it's a match. Whatever is on for the U.S. Open. I absolutely love the U.S. Open. You know, people always talk about, like, when would you want to go to New York? This is when I would want to go to New York. When the U.S. Open is on, football camps, baseball, hockey training camps getting underway. I still remember Sampras, Agassi, I think 2001, 2000 in a quarterfinal or a semifinal. Maybe the best tennis match I ever watched. And I bailed. It was a Saturday night. I stayed home. My buddies were going out. They're like, I can't believe you're staying home to watch tennis. I'm like, this is going to be good. And it was. It was epic. It was one of the best matches of all time. I have not watched as much tennis as I certainly used to. I'd like to get back more into it. Just life seems to get in the way. But I do watch the U.S. Open because I think it's fantastic theater. This year, with Serena retiring, it's going to be even better. I mean, it's such a weird dynamic because of when kind of the retirement was announced. There's not really a farewell tour. If she loses early, somebody knocks her out. That's it. That's all we get of Serena Williams. How weird would that be, no offense, to some no-name that knocked out the possibly greatest tennis player of all time, not just women's tennis player, the greatest tennis player of all time, gets knocked out like early at the U.S. Open and that's it? It's like you go to Gretzky's retirement game and he leaves after the second period. He should have in that game because he set everybody up in that game and nobody could finish. He should have took his skates off and said, you guys suck. I am out of here. Nobody can finish all these great setups. I'm leaving after this first period. That's what Gretzky should have done. But that would be like you go to watch Derek Jeter's last game and he comes out after the third. Like, what happens if somebody knocks her out? That will suck. I'd love for her to win. I still think she can. Like I said, maybe the best tennis player of all time when it comes to pure strength and domination of her peers, which to me, I think is what the GOAT is all about. I mean, Tom Brady is the GOAT because he has won everything, but that's not the same in basketball. Like, a lot of people don't think Bill Russell is the GOAT. They look at Jordan and LeBron. So I don't know. But I think when you are so much better than your peers, I mean, the years that Gretzky could have won the scoring race with his assists, way better than your peers. That's certainly what I know Craig Button, one of the criteria he looks at with generational players. How much better are they than everybody else they're playing with? And listen, if Mario Lemieux had been healthy, he might have broke a lot of Gretzky's records. Who knows? He was dominant, but like, the guy missed 2 months for cancer and won the scoring race. Serena was dominant above her peers. I mean, there's been some incredible women's tennis players. Don't get me wrong. You know, I go back to the Martina-Chris Everett rivalry. You know, I don't go back as far as Billie Jean King, but I go back to Chris Everett, Martina, and then, you know, and I'm going to miss a ton of people, but you get through Steffi Graf and all the amazing Arantxa Sanchez, Vicari, like just the amazing women's tennis players that were out there. The Swiss, terrific, Martina Hingis. I mean, all of them were great. They were all great. but they were never as dominant, in my opinion, as Serena Williams was. So it's going to be a weird U.S. Open to watch if she loses at some point, and you're like, you get robbed of it. Oh, Larry says, I still like Mahomes too. That playoff shootout between him and Allen was legendary. Hard not to like Herbert's upside and trajectory. I don't think Circa regrets that pick. Yeah, Martina Hingis. That's who we were going with. I knew Larry would come up with the name. So yeah, I wouldn't be disappointed if in a dynasty league I took Herbert as well. Okay, so a couple other things I want to get into. Ultimate Fantasy Women's Basketball Association. Show Ali getting by the way, Show Ali part of the Blue Jays broadcast. It's nice to hear him on those broadcasts as part of that. The semifinals are underway in the UFWBA playoffs after a very interesting pair of first games are in the books. Sparrows lead Aurora 143-93.5. That's a 4 seed leading possibly an upset of the number 1 seed. Candace Parker, 19 points, 18 boards, 5 assists, 4 assists in game 1. And then a lot tighter of a matchup. Bull City Blazers, number 2. Diamond Arrows, number 3. So the middle matchup. The Arrows narrowly lead by about 6.5 points, 177, 171.5. Games 2 and 3 go Wednesday, Sunday, and then Tuesday, Thursday of next week. We've got it all here. Several different basketball leagues, football leagues, hockey, as Larry said, UFAHL coming up very soon. We had the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors, and we will again in December. So if you would like more information, if you would like to find out, we also have our daily fantasy NFT sports cards that are coming out. Check those out. Head to UFFsports.com. That is the website that we have where you can find out. You can check out the leagues. You can check out the rosters. You can check out the amazing logos. The artwork is next level. And you can find out a little bit more information about our platform and our leagues as well. And this is how you can get in touch with us, the various different ways on Twitter, UFFS Network, UFF Sports, on Instagram, UFF Sports Official, and the website, again, UFFsports.com. If you'd like to send us an email, it's UFFsports.com. All right, big thanks to our guest lineup. Today, we chatted with Andy McNamara, head of football operations for UFFS. He gave out his rankings. If you want to check it out, this will be uploaded to YouTube later on. Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network is where you can find that. And Larry Fisher gave a terrific overview of our scouting platform, which you can check out more of at UFFsports.com. Our top 3 today, or rather our question of the day, did Rory McIlroy win the Tour Championship or did Scotty Scheffler lose it? I'm on the end of Scheffler blowing it. And our top 3 strangest injuries in light of Aroldis Chapman being placed on the IL because of an infection for a tattoo. So our top 3, Jason Pierre-Paul and his fireworks accident on July 4th. Glenn Allen Hill, a nightmare falling through a glass table. And Dustin Penner, injured eating pancakes. Which led to one of the best nicknames of all times, Pancake Penner. Thank you so much. We also previewed the Anaheim Ducks, brought to you by Dobber Hockey today. We'll have another preview tomorrow, some more great guests, and find out what happened tonight in the world of sports. Thank you so much for joining me on the program today. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your Monday. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Same time, same place, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on twitch.tv/ultimate Fantasy Sports. See you again.
And look who's coming up.
Thanks now.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.